Leave it 851, turn right, heading 180. Order 14 Papa, turn right 245, report localizer established 27.
Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. This is the second time we've had the chance to sit down and chat. The first time we really took a look at your career and the rise of the Seaplane Experience, and obviously that's only grown in recent months following a brilliant announcement yesterday at the time of recording. So as I always we'll have it in different subsections, and opening up, I think the perfect way to begin this is for people that may still not be totally aware of Tailwind. Could you outline just what the company's about?
Sure. So Tailwind is a veteran-owned small business based in Westchester County, New York. That's just outside of New York City. We have a fleet of amphibious caravan seaplanes. We also have another business that manages aircraft and charters them, land jets, jets, turboprops, a wide number, about 17 of those, in addition to our seaplane fleet. In my role, I'm in charge of the seaplane division, and that's where we run our scheduled service out of, which is likely the focus of this interview.
Of course, and further to an extension of Tailwind, what's your role at the company for people that may be curious?
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder here. I've been here for 5 years, and I run. I think technically I'm the director of scheduled services. Essentially, I run the seaplane division and map out everything from route planning to marketing, sales, some operational components as well, staffing, everything.
Everything, and I'm sure how you said you've been with them for 5 years. It's been probably quite the development over the recent 5 years, and I'm sure that's only going to continue for you guys.
It has. We've operated seaplanes since 2014. The company was founded in 2012. Largely, what we did up until about 2019 is just really use the seaplanes for charter, and occasionally one or two kind of spot scheduled services here and there, primarily in seasonal summer markets. That is where we all got started. Mm-hmm. But the focus and the long-term vision of the company has always been to use seaplanes to bridge, to create faster connections, initially in the Northeast, between large metro areas. And the three largest in the Northeast where we operate, of course, are Boston, Manhattan or New York City, and Washington, D.C. We recognize and think that it's an underutilized platform to bypass a lot of the current issues that plague both aviation and, in the United States, the very slow train system that we have. By utilizing waterways or very small airports that the caravan has access to, you're bypassing a lot of the bottlenecks that are currently there and the lack of reliability, and delivering something that truly is faster and more enjoyable for the passenger.
Of course, and that's always been a massive focal point, I think, when we've had these discussions and you looked anything up, and I've looked through all your comments, it's that faster means of transport in an area that, like we've said, is so congested as well, and deals with the traffic and the slow times and slow connection speeds and so forth.
Yeah, so speed is clearly the priority, but also I think what we found is equally as important to people is an enjoyable experience that has lower stress. When you look at what you need to do when you want to take a plane from, let's say, LaGuardia to Washington National Airport, you've got to factor in time to get to the airport. That could take you 15 or 20 minutes on a dreamy day, but could also take you 50 minutes. You could get to the airport and have a 2-minute security line and be able to get to the gate in 5 or 10 minutes. But that process could also take you an hour or more. Mm-hmm. And it's that uncertainty and the need to have to factor in all of that potential delay. The flight itself, even from New York to DC on a traditional, commercial plane, the airtime is only about 35 to 40 minutes. But the airlines have to block it off at over an hour and 10 minutes, usually hour and 15 minutes, just because it takes about half an hour for the airplane to negotiate all of the congestion that's in both the airways and on the ground. So all of those things combine to seaplanes and how we operate avoid a lot of that. When you arrive and let me say, maybe I'm talking too long, but it takes you, our dock is 10 minutes from Midtown, right? Maybe if you hit a bunch of traffic, it was 20 minutes, but it's not 50 minutes, right? In any scenario. Once you're at our dock, in Manhattan, you are not more than 5 minutes from the airplane. Our check-in cutoff time is just 10 minutes prior to departure. When there are not going to be 50 seaplanes trying to take off from the East River when you're trying to go. So, the airplane takes off. Of course, it's in the traditional airspace that everybody else is in. So there could possibly be some en route congestion, but you're also not trying to land in National Airport on the other side. You're going to a very uncrowded small airport called College Park, where you're going to be number one for arrival and number one for departure 99% of the time. So, and then when you get to the other side, you're only about 20-25 minutes from the nation's capital, as well as a number of large suburbs around the DC area. So it's different. You're interacting with at most 8 people, right? And in our quote airports, you're not interacting with many people at all, if any, beyond the people who are on the plane and our own ground staff. Whereas in in an airport or train station, you're interacting directly and indirectly with thousands of people. And there's a lot of things that have to happen and work right for things to go right. And so, I think that's just a big part of what we do.
Exactly. And I think we did mention, and you mentioned as well, that not only congestion, but I think especially nowadays, we were talking about the security times, 5 to 10 minutes. I think having a look at what's been going on in the broader aviation world, 5 to 10 minutes is almost unheard of at this point in time. And I think we're looking at, especially for those specific routes we were talking about, we're talking more time spent on the ground actually trying to get to the plane than probably in the air. And that's sort of the reality of what it's becoming.
That is stressful, right? I mean, I think people can understand that it might take an hour to get on a plane from Washington, New York. That's fine. But it's the unknowns around having to get to the airplane and getting from the front of, from the taxi, to the gate, and negotiating all the different steps you've got to do between there. It's the same, in some ways it's similar with the train. Train is a big service on our between the Washington, New York, and Boston. The train is a very valid option, and it's just slow. There's no other way to say. In Europe and in Asia, they have a lot of high-speed rail. What we call high-speed rail is not high-speed rail in the United States. It's just structurally slow, and it's still a very crowded experience. And so, if people who value time and lack of crowds and lower uncertainty can really take advantage of a company and a service like ours.
Totally. And obviously the big announcement yesterday, we haven't dove too much into that yesterday, but it involved that route through to College Park Airport. And when it was pitched to me, it was how it was one of the world's oldest airports and, of course, home to the Wright Brothers. So tell me a little bit about the announcement, from the frequency to the start date and so forth.
Yeah, so it's College Park is inside of the Beltway. It's actually the only scheduled service inside the Beltway that's outside of Washington National Airport, or Reagan Airport, some people call it. It's going to be operating Sunday through Friday, twice a day, timed kind of for early morning, later evening arrivals and departures on both ends. College Park is a really interesting place. It has a brand new terminal facility that was completed, I think, in 2016. And you've got adjacent free parking that's less than about 100 feet from the entrance of the terminal. So you can just drive your car up or Uber up or however you get there, and the airplane will be right there. The flight itself is a little bit longer than our Boston flight. It's about 80 minutes. Between 80 to 90 minutes. 90 is probably on the long side. Most times it will be about 80 minutes from College Park into Manhattan. Arrival into Manhattan is at our normal arrival spot on East 23rd Street in Manhattan. So you get off the plane and you're right in the city. I'm not sure what else to say about it. It's very much akin to the service that you would get on our New York to Boston route. The biggest exception, of course, is we're landing at an airport on the Washington side. So as most of your readers probably know, Our planes have both wheels and floats, so the plane is just as comfortable in both environments.
Pretty exciting when I saw the news of landing at an airport. It sort of puts a spin on everything. You mentioned your role at Tailwind sort of encompasses a lot of different things. So what is the process from initial mention of this potential route at Tailwind to, again, just like the process throughout to eventually where we're at today, where yesterday you guys announced it and obviously looking to begin it in the coming month?
So, I mean, you've got to look at the overall company vision, first of all, and see what we're trying to do. Then, we do market research. We use third parties. We use our own research. We look at what's going on. Then you measure it up against potential of what our equipment and our service could do. There's an interesting graph on our website that, you can say, okay, well, if we do this, we're going to be faster, and we're delivering on our core, on our core proposition. Then you got to engage with the local authorities and folks down in College Park. We looked at a wide number of destinations we could land at in the Washington, D.C. area, and had to kind of go through a whole process of weeding out what's feasible, what's not feasible, where the best market conditions exist. Then you've got then there's some special considerations around Washington airspace, as most people know. We've got to make sure we meet those requirements and come up with plans to address, the additional security and regulations that involve flying into and out of the DC FRZ. Once we do that, we did a couple of proving runs and some trials, and then you work towards the launch, and then you give people a really good reason to buy. Like we have as a promotion to build up loads and to get people to try the service, we've got an ongoing promotion where if you buy one, a companion flies with you at no cost. So that's a pretty great deal. It's essentially 50% off for two people. And we'll be running that and then getting people to trial our service, engaging with media, engaging with local groups who can help us spread the word. Finding partners for us, whether it be hospitality partners or transportation providers, any number of other things, and then launching the route and seeing where things go. It's very promising. All signs point to it being a good decision, but we'll see what happens. Talk to me in November. I'll tell you how I think things are actually going.
Of course. Like you said, it's a long process. There are so many steps, and with the world we're in, that can change at a moment's notice. And I'm sure in the things you've set up in just not this route, but all the things you've set up in recent years, you've probably experienced challenges here and there. And one day it's looking like this, and then maybe the next day it's, we may have to account for this. Did you experience any challenges when you were establishing this new route?
Not particularly. I mean, there are some limitations, around accessing the DC. There were some delays in terms of getting some of the regulatory stuff we had to deal with that's unique to flying into Boston. To flying into College Park. Otherwise, it's very much like adding a new route. We've got to understand how they are. It's a relatively long route for our seaplanes. So we've got to understand where our limitations are and what we can and can't do. Everything gets run through a safety management program that we have here and a risk assessment program that we have here to make sure that things are in the clear. And then it's kind of off to the races. Getting things into our website, getting things, updating our app, updating, all the kind of blocking and tackling that you need to do to launch a new route.
Of course. Now, the last time we spoke, we did heavily discuss the Seaplane Experience, which is something that I think is unique to Tailwind and something that is also very important if selecting Tailwind. You mentioned how one of the major differences between, say, getting the train and getting Tailwind is you're probably only dealing with a handful of people in comparison to the 100 you may experience. So what would you say, in your personal opinion, are some of the key and fundamental factors in building that Seaplane Experience to be a memorable but also successful one?
So we are a high touch service. Tend to be in personal contact with most of our passengers. We of course have modern systems that allow us to send text messages or things when something changes. We've got a lounge in Manhattan. We've got a lounge in Boston. So it's there's a nice kind of waiting area, weather protected. In Washington, we won't necessarily have a dedicated lounge, but the terminal building itself is a large building with plenty of facilities and things. Mm-hmm. On board, the experience of being on one of our planes, the seats themselves are one by one down a central aisle. So every seat is both an aisle and a window. Windows on the Caravans are quite large because of the way that plane is. So you have beautiful window. That tends to be our in-flight entertainment. The seats themselves have about a 36-inch seat pitch, so that's akin to a premium economy type situation. So it's comfortable, it's leather, it's climate controlled. We have air conditioning on our aircraft as well. It's also somewhat no frills, right? There's no flight attendant. There's no. We do have some drinks on board, but really it's much more basic than that. But it's also very comfortable. Taking off from the water, especially in Manhattan or Boston, is a pretty special experience. You are right. You essentially get a sightseeing tour of Manhattan on your way in and out. And the same could be said for Boston. For Washington, of course, we're not flying over the middle of Washington, D.C., but you do get to see a lot of fascinating geography, all up and down the eastern seaboard as you fly. Our aircraft don't fly above 10,000 feet, really. So, you're typically relatively low to the ground, and a lot of people just kind of get captivated by the scenery as they're flying.
And these are just some viewer and listener questions that were put forward. So interestingly enough, some people had heard of Tailwind and some hadn't. This one is from Amelia, who had not heard of Tailwind before. She wanted to know whether you're planning, Tailwind generally, are looking to redefine seaplane usage, with their operations.
I mean, yes. Yes and no. I mean, seaplanes are used all around the world, largely, out of some larger cities. You've got quite mature seaplane operations in Vancouver and Seattle. We would like to do something similar in the Northeast. I think the use of we make excessive, exclusive use of the Cessna Caravan, which I think is and the amphibian nature of it too, which is really the ideal aircraft for the Northeast, the way it is right now. So in that sense, that's a little bit revolutionary. I think we view the seaplanes in general as what is going to lead into the urban mobility revolution. When these future platforms, whether they be eVTOLs or hybrids or electric aircraft come on board, they're largely going to be addressing a network that we're hoping to build. And that network is connecting population centers faster. Some are very much focused more on a helicopter mission, kind of smaller. We're focused on the kind of intercity, 90 to 350 mile kind of flight. And so we see us being in a good position to be early adopters of green or improved platforms from an environmental stewardship perspective. And, in that sense, that might be relatively revolutionary.
I know that's been a bit...
It's an evolution, but it's a really big one that's coming to aviation, and it's going to come to our area first.
It's been a major talking point, I think, in forums, conferences, events, the use of more efficient means of transport, and like you said, Tailwind are looking to adopt that, and I think that sector is definitely a brilliant place to start.
We have active partnerships with a couple of companies, and we have some ongoing discussions with a lot of them. A lot of them are very curious about our network and what we're trying to do, and are helping design aircraft, or some of them are hard to define, whether they're planes or what they are, but flying vehicles that I think will be transformative. I don't know the exact timing. Part of me believes it might be a little bit longer than some of the optimistic projections. Strictly from particularly when it comes to taking paid commercial passengers. That tends to be the last thing we'll let it, and those platforms will probably prove themselves out in military and cargo functions first. But as soon as that's finished, Tailwind will be a leader in adopting them.
And finally, we had someone named Max, and I'm not sure. His question was a bit of a unique one, so I was wondering, you could probably take it where you'd like to, because he didn't add in specifics, but he wanted to more discuss the future of Tailwind in other markets. I know last time we discussed that there are a couple of opportunities potentially, and you've mentioned extensively that northeastern corridor. A Tailwind looking at other markets, or that was his question, as in the furthest city you guys might be targeting, and just general other markets that Tailwind might be interested in moving into later down the line?
Yeah, so broadly, yes, there are a myriad of other markets in the Northeast. We can identify probably 24 that we can serve from hubs out of both Washington, Manhattan, and Boston. So there is a lot of existing expansion possibilities. There's also new geographies entirely, whether they be, most of them being within the United States, but the Southeast, Florida area comes to mind. Potentially, there's some others in the Great Lakes or even out on the West Coast. There's a number of others, but we've got a long way to go still in the Northeast, and even some parts of the Caribbean as well are of interest to us. In terms of the longest route we would operate with our seaplanes, right around the length of New York to Washington is about the longest. That's probably, practical for an aircraft like that. So it's exciting. There's a lot of places to plug in. It's not just the traditional routes, though. You got to remember, we don't think traditionally about almost anything. You could get service from a lot of secondary and tertiary airports into the water. Places that don't have any service at all and that really couldn't have commercial airline service could have Tailwind Air service, and we could plug those in. We can do some connecting traffic. We can really bring those areas onto the map and provide a lot of access to urban cores that they don't have right now.
And I'm sure in your position, you've mentioned so much just there, and I have no doubt, given your passion for Tailwind, that's probably always in the back of your head, circling ideas, thinking about what's next. And I guess, how you did mention, for Tailwind, that's a lot to be looking at in a later period. As we said, you've got a lot still now on your plate. So short-term moving forward, what are some of the goals and I guess ambitions the company has? Not so much, let's say, in the next 10 years, but maybe just the next year.
Yeah, so the next year is really, growing our current routes. They're two of the larger opportunities we see between Washington and New York and Boston. Growing our fleet, continuing to grow our fleet. Sorry, adding in, finding places where we can either improve reliability, increase frequency. We've had a number of successes with some seasonal service, Provincetown or some of our Hampton services, more the traditional routes we've operated. There's a lot of opportunity to grow inside of those as well. So we're not abandoning our routes, but we're very focused on building a regional airline, so to speak, that serves not just summer destinations, but year-round destinations that all travelers are interested in.
And if someone's now listened to this piece and heard everything you've had to say and wanted to learn more about Tailwind, bar what we've said here, what would be the best place to find Tailwind and just learn more about the operation?
Our website, of course, has the most information about us. That's flytailwind.com. If anyone wants to have any I think I always try and make myself accessible, or someone on my team, if anyone has ideas or thoughts or constructive feedback. People do spot our planes in Manhattan and in Boston. They're beautiful. People submit pictures all the time. We're relatively active on Instagram and Twitter. So, that's more kind of current pace. And then following places like DJs or following what you're up to. So anything like that is great.
Perfect.
We're small, so if people want to reach out proactively to someone on the team, you can submit a form. Someone invariably will get back to you.
And I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that connectivity. And again, that's going to go back to what we were discussing at the beginning. It's that really having an emphasis on the people at Tailwind as well. Because like you said, it's not an operation with 500 people on a train.
Our pilots are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They're just really experienced, great group of guys that are doing things that, they're really working hand in hand with us, and got some great dock staff, operations team. It's been amazing to see our growth, especially in the last 24 to 36 months.
And the people are always important in anything, and having the right people, I'm sure, can fill you with a sense of pride, no doubt, as well.
Yeah, it's been good, and we've all had challenges, of course, with the pandemic and all this remote stuff, and a lot of uncertainty around a lot of people's lives. It's been great to see our team coalesce around our mission, and I've never had more fun professionally. And more interest in what I'm doing, and I think we're just at the very, very beginning of what can be done.
And that's why it's always a pleasure part of me to sit down and chat Tailwind with you, because I'll always say it, I can see that passion when you're talking about it, when you're answering what I'm asking you. You always have that passion and that smile that comes with it. So thank you very much. That's all from me today. I'm very excited to see where Tailwind develops, and of course in the next month with the launch of that route. And I look forward to hopefully speaking to you again sometime in the future.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.